All right, guys. Welcome back from the welcome back to the Opinionated Collective. Since our last episode, it's been a little bit of a hiatus, for personal reasons. So I'm glad to be coming back to you today with Justin. And today we're going to discuss a very awesome topic today. The topic that we decided to discuss today is basically post-secondary education. Why has it become important, as well as why is the job market so difficult today in 2022? So, I'm your host, Benjamin, and today we're bringing Justin back from our last episode, and we're going to discuss some fun things today. So, here we go. In the first segment today, basically, and this will be cut out later. So for our first topic today, a little bit of back history on me. I worked in retail for almost up to 16 years. So luckily enough, last year, I was finally able to achieve my first job after a combination of working in retail for up to 16 years, doing internships and acquiring 2 degrees over a 9.5-year period. In 2008, when the first recession hit, if you had a college degree, it was a short wait for you, depending on how long that recession impacted your personal circumstances. If you did not have a bachelor's degree, it was not easy, for you. Now, Justin, in 2009, were you still in college or were you just finishing up?
Actually, I was studying for my master's degree because in 2008, I was told there was no job for me in my field, even though I had a college degree in which I graduated in 2007. Actually, it was December. And I simply went around, applied for jobs like a normal, ordinary person, and I kept getting stiffed.
Now, remind me, what was your bachelor's degree in?
I graduated from University of Toledo with a bachelor's of pharmaceutical sciences. And so what it is a BSPS. And my major was pharmacy administration. I also triple minored, although only 2 out of 3 counted on the transcript. And that would be in chemistry, business administration, and economics.
Now, for a little continued back history on me. In 2009, I had actually just finished up my associate's degree. My associate's degree, abnormally enough, during the 9.5 years audience, that degree was in marketing. So during that time, I had just finished up a 4-year period of working at the Mount Kisco movie theater. And, at that point, I was working part-time, living in Katona, getting ready to go on for my bachelor's degree. The bachelor's degree is actually what took a little longer. So unfortunately, my job prospects were limited. During that time, I had actually worked for Mount Kisco Parks for a brief year. And then as soon as I started Mercy College, I was actually working at General Nutrition Centers, or General Nutrition Corporation /GNC. That job I stayed with for about 5 years because I was also living in Dobbs Ferry at the same time, or close to 5 years. So by the year 2013, I had to take some time off and move down to DC with my dad, where trying to get an entry-level job down there, probably as you experienced during that time frame, it wasn't easy. It really wasn't at that time, because from 2009 to 2011, we had a debt ceiling raise. I'm sure you remember Occupy Wall Street, correct?
Correct.
Now, for those who may have been under 30, you wouldn't really remember this as much because this affected people 30 and up. But basically, the Occupy Wall Street movement was effectively a protest. Anyone who was 32 to 41 now, and this is millennials Y1, just so everyone's aware, I wrote a really great article that I shared on LinkedIn earlier in the week about millennials Y1 and millennials Y2. The most affected group was millennials Y1. You know this, I know this. Literally, our job prospects were murdered at that time.
That is correct.
So what made it especially difficult in a changing economy, I don't know if you experienced this or not, but this was a difficulty for me, was this whole focus on now applications have to be done online. So basically, tell me if you remember and tell us what some of your frustrations were with quote unquote finding a job. Because especially our baby boomer parents, more specifically your mother and my father at this point in their lives, they just don't understand how the modern economy works.
Yes, Ben. And to the audience, I would like to say that it's a few things, but with some background. Before the financial collapse of 2008, the fundamental assumptions of job changed in the late 1990s, starting with the idea of at-will employment. Because at-will employment was implemented from the 1990s, we have this idea of slow to hire, quick to fire environment, meaning that no job is safe anymore.
Oh, especially retail. I can definitely tell you how many times I was probably in jobs like that, and that wasn't fun.
No, it's absolutely not fun. However, with this background, my primary frustrations initially, other than the everything is going toward online now, and it is now all online, was the very fact that I would actually notice that the same people owned, managed, or controlled the same branches of companies. Like I would go to Walgreens, fill out an application in at least 2 or 3 different cities in states, all owned by the same or managed by the same person. So at the end of the day, I would interview, find out there's no job for me, go back into the system, I like my resume, I go to interview, see the same person that I just interviewed with a few days ago or a few weeks ago. And it's literally a hi, bye, thanks for your time, shake my hand, and shake his hand. And it's like, goodbye. You know you're not getting a job. You were told that a while ago.
Do you know what I used to say about that? So before I go into a little story with the background about this too, because I actually, ironically, during 2009, from 2009 onward to 2021 last June, what happened was a very long process for me. But to give some background, if I wanted to get a job, before everything started shifting to LinkedIn in 2020, where I learned that people were getting jobs that way, the way I had to used to do it was you would have to create an account on a website, for example, of your favorite company, which was the job boards. So this was JP Morgan. I'll give you an example. I had wanted to be a bank teller. during 2013, 2012, and a little before that. Didn't realize you had to go onto those sites, register for the site itself and the job board, fill out an application, and then guess what HR send once you completed the application? Psychological test.
Yeah, or some
Teller
other,
assessment.
yeah,
And
a psychological
unfortunately,
behavior, or some sort of assessment.
actually, I have a good example for you. And you know what my new official brand at this point, or not, or thing that I would eventually like to do, and the audience will understand this over time, Unopinionated Collective. As we touched on in the relationships episode, I am actually on the autistic spectrum, or what we call a high functioning autistic. So basically, what I am about to basically educate the public on is a problem that these psychological tests do. Do you remember what the Wonderlic exam was? There was an example used at the NFL Combine on this in the 2000s. And basically, the Wonderlic test was basically a psychological test that's really meant for a neurotypical person or non-autistic person to pass, because the questions are not geared toward somebody who's on the autistic spectrum. So literally, my application on, for example, as a personal banker or a teller would get rejected automatically on JP Morgan Chase website or Bank of America, because those tests are not geared for autistic adults at all.
That is interesting.
And unfortunately, a lot of these issues, it's very difficult, that I think our society needs to really start addressing is how would you streamline or make the hiring process for an autistic easier? I think one solution that could be done in the hiring process is eliminating these psychological tests that are for neurotypical people like yourself, or somebody who might be able to figure this out, because this wasn't just the first time. Earlier on my resume, my first job was at a movie theater before they started going with all this, technological hiring online aspect. And all I had to do was fill out an application.
Oh yeah, I mean, before
when we were coming out of early 2000s, you wanted to get a job, you walked into the store. Hey, are you hot? Where there was a hiring sign. Gen Xers got to do this. Boomers got to, and early 2000s. Boomers, Gen Xers, silent generation, our generation, older millennials.
Yep.
We could all do that. After 2008, everything started going online. And this is exactly where it just became more difficult and more difficult and more difficult. It looked easier, but in all reality, it isn't.
No, it's not easier at all. I mean, you essentially are just a number in the applicant tracking system. And if you don't,
you mean what the recruiters all talk about on LinkedIn, which I don't know if I would argue that's a myth, or is that real?
You mean the whole applicant tracking system ordeal?
Yes.
And that you're just a number? No, it's true. I mean, that's the first step, is getting through AI and applicant tracking software that they use. If you can't get past that, you're screwed. You're never going to get.
Is that why you need to write? Is that why you need to write a resume a certain way?
Part of it, yes. And another reason for keywords is so that the applicant tracking system likes you enough.
But one thing, even though I didn't write it onto my paper for this segment, though, is I just went through an internal process, and they already know me. So therefore, I didn't really have to pass through an ATS system.
Correct. Your resume is already on file. Humans have already read it. And it's just a matter of
finding the correct match for my skills.
Correct. Yes. Once you're internal, it's a little easier because you don't have to go through the whole
you mean I don't have to come through a bunch of stupid, crazy process that you have to go through just to be able to get hired?
Just to get an interview. Forget getting hired. How about an interview? And actually, I think today things are a little bit better because a lot of companies are hopping on board to more generic applicant tracking systems. So I'm seeing a lot of companies using the same applicant tracking system, but you still need to register each time per company. But once
One
you have gone through a
technological
few,
trend,
you
yeah.
you're okay. But the
Well,
key
no,
word is writing your resume in a way that's applicant tracking system friendly.
that's interesting because I know one of who we're going to have on next week for, when we do a gender based episode. She and I talked about that back and forth, and this is Elizabeth. We both agreed that we're not sure if this is a myth or this is actually true, because I see a lot of promotion of this for resume writers just on the LinkedIn platform alone.
Oh no,
So
it's true. It's
so
definitely
for
true.
people who weren't sure, basically, here's what Occupy Wall Street was. Occupy Wall Street was the older millennials who went to college. They ended up with hefty loans, and when most graduated, the ones who didn't get hired figured, we need to go down to Wall Street and basically start protesting because the system is not fairly placing us.
Well,
It that
well,
became more of a political issue because
yeah,
their
it has.
platform for this was basically wealth inequality, political corruption, corporate influence of government. Now, do I
Nothing new.
think nothing new, but one thing I will say in regards to our US political system, because I don't know how it is elsewhere in other countries, if a lot of it is the same, which some of it probably is, but in this country, we have a much bigger problem. In this country, we basically just have lobbying groups, but our government, when they talk about, oh, the economy is great, it's because their kids are getting jobs.
Yeah, it's funny because you know what they say. It's one thing if Johnny from across the street isn't getting a job versus, well, my son isn't getting a job versus now I don't not getting a job. So the whole politics around in the economy are local, they're personal.
Oh,
And
they are.
so that's why we see a lot of discrepancy between generations because for the first time ever, and actually this is interestingly enough, is older millennials, they had the privilege of, seeing the old system work and
Which
also not work.
So you just hit something. I'm going to explain to a point what the old system was. I touched on a little bit of the old system. The old system was, in some aspects, going back to when our parents were looking for their jobs, the economy worked a little differently for them. When they came out with their college degrees or bachelor degrees, what they had to do was basically they took their car, they went to HR departments, and they typically applied on premises. In New York,
Mhm.
the way you actually unfortunately got a job, and this is where it got a little annoying, was what boomers would used to say is it's not all about what you know, it's who you know, which I think holds some level of truth, because I experienced looking for a job in the DC market that you had to know at least 5 people within the area. So in the DC area, here's how you would get your job with a government agency. Normally, they'll give a job first to somebody who's enlisted in the military because, let's be honest, they're already technically a government employee. That's way number one. I had to learn a few things around that market. Number two was you went to one of the local area colleges like George Washington University. You were an elite rich kid who, and I'm not, and nothing against, nothing against the wealthier kids, but the typical Georgetown student came from a prominently wealthy family. Let's be really honest. If you think I'm wrong, then you're welcome to disagree with me. But the people who have really good grades typically came from families where they could make that investment in tutoring. Why do you think they're getting such high grades? So that's way two. Way three was you did an internship in one of the senator or congressman or congresswoman's offices over the summer, or, in one of their private sector companies. And way four was what I tried to do, was start all over there, building a network from scratch. That completely blew up in my face. Because unfortunately, the fourth way, when you move down and you have no connection to the area, it's almost literally impossible down in the DC market to be able to get a job like that, especially when you have so much, on your resume that was from another state. So where my father and I still experience some level of misunderstanding on how to get a job these days is it's not like it was for what you and I experienced when we were kids, where you could walk into a place. And one thing he even asked me is, why can't you go to, for example, the Discovery Channel building, walk into HR, and then talk to someone? And my response to him was as follows. There are security people up front. I can't find the hiring manager or the recruiter, on a regular website. How am I going to go about finding this person's number to be able to talk to someone? Secondly, with buildings like that, especially in the nation's capital, this is an NYC thing. You must have an appointment to enter a corporate building. This isn't the old days. Especially post 9/11, where everything is a higher security risk. Thank you very much. Now you must have an appointment to be able to go into these private or government-oriented buildings. And the other thing he and I have had a disagreement with is it's also the level of, where we both are as job seekers. Later on in your life, when you're my father and you've been in finance for 30 to 40 years, you can effectively get hired as what I call a business executive. Therefore, the recruiting process is much, 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 much differently, where you don't necessarily have to deal with recruiters, especially with the federal government. In my circumstances, where I'm coming from, mostly literally a retail background, plus I have a disability, my recruiting process is not the same. You can even see this yourself.
Oh yeah, I mean every step of the way, even different industries. Now going back to how it was for me. I mean, I worked at a Burger King for like 5 years before college, and I remember I think it was like 1995 or six or whatever year it was. I literally walked into that Burger King with my mother, filled out an application, had a 15-minute interview, and was hired on the spot. Today, you can't even get
Retailers do that. They do hiring fairs, but they do that at certain times. They only do it when they're literally that desperate.
Yeah, but think of it this way. You can't do that. You can't even do that in fast food anymore, because guess what? Everything's online.
Oh, of course. That's the other problem now.
That's the point now.
That because technology has completely evolved.
Yeah. So to get a job at McDonald's or at, say, a grocery store as a bagger, you can't walk in and say, "Hi, I need a job. I want a job as a bagger, as a burger flipper, or whatever." No, you have to go apply online. Guess what? You're now a number. Gotta go through the same process. No one's
I
favorite.
actually used to have to tell people that when I worked at GNC, as funny as this sounds. So, and during that time, what happened was why my hiring process was a little more unique last year was due to the fact that I was posting on LinkedIn for a while. So I finally got noticed by a recruiter who had my resume from previous, whatchamacallit. He finally found a match for me. But what they did was they saw me posting on LinkedIn. Okay, cool. So the customer service experience fit for my current medical group, but that was, where before 2014, I still had to fill out an application online, but I was able to print it off and bring it to the store manager. And then, we had the interview and then I was hired. And post 2014, I had to go through a job agency as an autistic for about a year. I had every year from 2009 to 2021, before I went back to Mercy College, and this was even for internships, I was only averaging maybe 6 or 8 interviews a year if I was lucky. Same in 2018. I go back to school in 2016, and the interview process for an internship got a little easier because guess what? Unfortunately, they will only hire an intern who's enrolled in college. I believe that may have started to change a little bit in 2017, but they were still transitioning off the old way of doing things. But in order to even get hired to an entry-level job, you had to be in a college program, which unfortunately makes it completely unfair.
That's the biggest thing that I had that was so interesting is you want an internship, you want experience prior to junior level, you gotta be in a college program. Which is ridiculous.
I understand the logic. And before we start discussing, the educational path part of it, but now, unfortunately, where companies make a mistake is you're only looking at one crop of applicants. What if that one crop of applicants who's only enrolled in a college program never had actual practical, working experience? And am I advocating for retail workers being just as qualified as a college applicant? Absolutely. No. To a point, because guess what? Everything I learned in a retail store and a warehouse is almost similar to an office.
And that's one of the big issues too, is what does a college degree even mean in terms of training versus working in a real world setting? I'm hearing that for every year of college, it's 2 to 3 years of actual work experience in terms of training.
But then for somebody who's autistic like me to now be pigeonholed to customer service, which is a conversation I was having with my mother. It's not a bad background to have. All right.
No.
That's not my issue. But to now be pigeonholed for 16 years to one thing, instead of them seeing that I can analyze like an analyst. I've been in enough entry-level retail positions, even as an autistic, where I've literally seen management styles that literally no longer work, that are completely inappropriate to the 2010s and the 2020s, which are no longer applicable. I think I'm just as qualified to, be working in an analyst position as somebody who was just in a college program who didn't have to go through that.
It's funny you say that, because it's experience that people like to discount.
Well, this comes to my other issue. This is in regards to HR and recruiters. I would say this might just be from personal experience, but I don't know how you feel about this. 10 to 30% of them actually worked a retail or a customer service oriented job front facing with people. The other 70%, and they're probably going to jump down my throat for this, literally have no qualifications to be a recruiter and have no business being a recruiter. But they got the position probably through a friend, which goes to the not what you know, but who you know. Whereas somebody like me, if I ever wanted to become a recruiter, firstly, I don't even know if I'd want to do it, because honestly, from viewing what they do on LinkedIn, that's more exhausting than me just promoting my show. But you're selling yourself. That's the one thing that I learned about retail that will never change in my life, the ability to sell myself. So now that we've touched on that, okay. Let's look at the qualifications between you and me and see why the job market is effectively a mess right now, and why, certain qualifications might not in your experience or my experience matter as much. I got my first job in the medical field finally last year due to a customer service background, which looked very promising to a medical group because a reasonably large amount of skills that transfer and translate well over to the medical industry, oddly enough, come from customer service and retail, which not many people that I've noticed that, within the field have had the experience of working, in retail before. Would you agree or disagree with me?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't disagree with you.
So in regards to human resource managers and recruiters, I think what's complicated the process is they don't know what they're looking for. That's become a huge issue. They might look at one candidate and say, I like him because of this background, and the recruiter can make the recommendation, but then the hiring manager has to see something they like about the person. And most of the times I've noticed between one or both, they're looking for a certain thing due to the fact that they're inexperienced in something in an area. And the slacker Steve that I used to know is a perfect example of people who should not be hiring managers because they're weak personalities, but they got the job due to the fact that they're in the right place at the right time. So lastly, what I'm going to focus on for this is the difference in the education qualifications. Okay. You're going for a computer science degree because if I remember correctly, you explained to me in text messages on various different occasions that you fell into coding when you worked at a dance studio. Am I correct? Or that's when you made your first website?
Well, I learned to code because I was competing with somebody else who had their own website, coded it themselves, and I realized that I needed a website. And after a few years of going off of templates and GoDaddy and other companies, I decided I didn't want to get charged for it anymore. So I started to learn how to code. But ultimately,
what was your first site?
my first site was for my dance business.
No. The first site that you used in the coding journey.
Oh, my first site. Oh, yes.
Code Academy, correct?
Yeah, to learn how to code. Yeah. Yeah.
So
It's
in
been
the
a
very
while.
beginning, what I think our audience and I definitely see with you is that you fell into coding in a similar way that I fell into, wanting to be a data analyst. Is I've been working since 2014, where I'm just entering information into a computer, which is, viewed as data. So I have an unorthodox experience working with data, just like we both fell into these.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I just felt like, hey, I mean, I need to learn how to, learn how to build websites. I mean, actually, now that I think about it, I was a director of website for the Ballroom Dance Club at a university at that time. So I already was being exposed that I've already started taking over from the previous guy. And so at this point, it's like, well, I should probably learn, especially it's something that I could possibly do for money in the future.
So yeah, you definitely got bitten by the entrepreneurial side of it, because what I'm about to say next is after Code Academy. So people understand this. The next level would be a tech boot camp. Now, tech boot camps, so everyone understands, were started by our generation. This was an idea to address the need of the fact that everyone was bitching about how expensive the fucking college, excuse my English, fucking college degree was. Because let's be honest,
Yeah. So
as much as I would, let me just finish. As much as I would prefer to do a computer science degree or a data analytics degree, honestly, most people sentiment that I would echo, most people just, let's be honest, they don't got time for it because of other things. But in all reality, especially talking with you all these years, I'm starting to see the logic in why long-term a college degree is just ultimately the best investment, because ultimately what I think and walk us through how you feel about tech boot camps.
Okay, so the thing is that my progression, I actually started off with a couple college courses. And then after some college courses, then I went into a certification program from a company out in Berlin. So I guess in a way it was kind of like a boot camp, but it was like a self-paced within 6 months type of deal. That's a whole nother thing. But after that, I did go through one of those boot camps. It was a local boot camp in Detroit. I think it was like 8 weeks plus a couple weeks pre-work. So it's like a total of 10 weeks. And it was really fast paced. There was a lot of fun, had a great cohort, met a lot of people. Um, and it was a great experience, except the price tag. And
That's
even
a turn off.
and back then, the price tag wasn't as high as it is today, because now that everything's been remote since COVID, the price has increased substantially. And the thing is that there is still no guarantee of a job.
The same
And
could be said with the
if
computer
you were
science
to,
degree. The
and
same
let
could
me,
be said with the college degree.
right. And the thing is that at this point, if you were to do more than a single boot camp, you're looking at, I don't know, like 20 to $50,000, depending on which 1, 2 boot camps you do. So
So
at
in
the end of
other
the
words,
day,
when we're
I
looking
mean,
at
you're spending a ton of money. And the thing is that when you spend that kind of money on a boot camp, you're not getting all the information. You spend a bunch of money on on a specific subset of a topic within software engineering. That's another thing. And I guess now there's some data analytics and data science versions of and variations of this, but it's very specific. And so you still have to go out and learn on your own.
right, and now the logic with the computer science degree, which is the last part of this,
Oh,
episode
yeah,
today, is as follows. In the
yeah.
long term, my feeling on this whole issue with what's going to look good to a recruiter or a hiring manager, I'm playing devil's advocate here. I know a lot of Gen Z is going to probably get pissed off with me for saying this. I know a lot of LinkedIn's going to get pissed off with me for saying this because I too see the logic. Unfortunately, we're stuck in a time where you're going to need to just get the goddamn degree, whether you want to admit it or not, because when a recruiter says we like certifications, we all know what you're really looking for. You're looking for the college degree. Like, stop, trying to feed us what looks good to you on LinkedIn being general. I watch other informative YouTube channels, and even they've said it with people from HR. HR hypocrites. Like, nothing personal against them as people, but we're talking about in the hiring process.
Yeah, they just want to see it. They want to see a degree. Nothing beats a credit carrying
Unfortunate traditional people
weighted
hate.
degree. They just do.
So the tech boot camp, I would, here's the issue. I'm going to end on this. Code Academy would probably be good as a base to just start to wet your feet. The certificate would be the next little small investment to just start off because I'm
Yeah.
in a full-time job.
Yeah,
After
those
that,
skinny
if I
dips.
was going to choose between the high-price tech boot camp or the degree, I unfortunately cannot pass off a tech boot camp in healthcare. They want the degree. So I'm stuck in a situation where this most likely is, I can acquire the skills needed, and, get some cool little credentials along the way. But ultimately, medical field wants the degree.
Yeah. And
All right,
there's
guys.
nothing wrong with that.
No, there isn't. So I hope everyone enjoyed me and Justin's perspective today on this. I hope you learned something. And tune in next week when we discuss a gender-related topic with our co-host, Miss Elizabeth, from the relationships episode. Have a good weekend, everybody.
Have a good weekend, y'all. Bye.
Bye. Welcome back, guys, to basically personal and corporate cringe. Okay, so today we're going to discuss a couple things. First question I'm going to pose, and then we're going to do a little rapid reaction. What is acceptable content on the LinkedIn platform? Today, I ran across somebody who who was cross-posting on Instagram about how they basically bought their first house. Now, here's how I feel about that. Each platform has its own unique purpose. LinkedIn, which is a business platform, is not a place that I would be posting about purchasing a house or buying a car or talking about my marriage. How do you feel about this?
Oh, please. Like, at this point, I don't understand why people treat LinkedIn as their personal outlet.
Hashtag social Saturday. Give me a friggin' break.
That's a good. That's pretty good. Social Saturday. Yeah. So
let me just say this, and then
you
it's
have other places to post that kind of stuff.
Thank
LinkedIn is
you.
not the place.
If you're gonna post how you bought a house or a car on LinkedIn, I have seen larger, much older content creators, in this case, more well-known gurus, who are flashing this crap off on LinkedIn and other social media platforms where the reader has called them out on it. First off, especially when we're dealing with posts that are relating to financial purchases. If you want to post it on LinkedIn, do whatever the hell you want. At the very minimum, you owe your reader the explanation on how did you achieve this? What was the plan? How did you execute it? I want to learn how you did it, because honestly, I've seen a very large, well-known marketing creator say the exact same, say something that you will probably agree with me on, and that's as follows. I'm not going to give her name, but she's very good with marketing. And this was what her post said. And then I'm going to read my post real quick. Her post was basically as follows. People love to flex, but nobody really cares. Be proud of your Forbes under 30 under 30. Be proud of your MBA and your accomplishments. Just remember, when people land on your profile, it's time to sell them on how, it's not time to sell them on how great you are. It's time to sell them on how you can help them. The more aware you are of the ideal client, the more you'll speak directly to them in their profile. How? Question mark. We teach you in the LinkedIn video boot camp. She is promoting something, but what she's saying is the truth. How are you going to help me in what your business is? How is it going to benefit me? How is it going to get me from point A to what you just purchased? If you can't address this on LinkedIn, get the hell off LinkedIn with that.
That's funny because
and that was your and that is your TED Talk.
And at the end of the day, businesses were originally created to serve and not be served. And this is one of the issues we have today with most business is it's all about making profit. Yes, it's all about profit. We know the corporate charter is inherently promoting profit. Yeah, at the end of the day, attracting that profit through that revenue comes from your customers, your clients, and you gotta meet their needs first.
Therefore, as I stated, I don't want to see your goddamn house purchase. Keep that crap on fucking Instagram. Excuse my language once again. That's an Instagram and Facebook post. And even still then, shout out to Millennials Y2 coming from Millennials Y1. I covered this in an article I wrote earlier this week. We get it. You guys are very confident in yourselves. You guys are very confident in yourselves. You're very social media savvy. Do not brag about being on the Forbes list when you are under 30. I do not give a rat's ass about that. I care
Most
about
people don't.
will your content help me determine for myself what I want out of this life, or are you just bragging? Because this is where we get into being a guru. Now, the big tech layoffs and the fight against remote work. I read an article earlier this week which basically stated as follows. Did remote work reported to the Hill cause housing prices? Firstly, do not under any circumstance blame remote work for this. Remote work had nothing to do with that. What happened was basically every government across the United States and companies chose to shut the economy down like a light switch. This caused people to be able to now stay home, save money off an expensive commute. If you're going to blame remote work, why don't you blame your completely crappy personality as a leader, thinking I need to come into your office 5 days a week? You and I both know no one needs to be going into an office 5 days a week. 2 or 3 days a week is perfectly acceptable. Then let me stay home the other 2 days of the week in a hybrid type situation. Or make the job fully remote. But to blame remote work for why housing went up, according to Zillow, which was 23%, no, that's not remote work's fault. That's the people who are selling their houses trying to be greedy. Make a few more bucks because what person A, who is likely a younger or older baby boomer, bought back in the 1970s or 1980s for a lot less. And trust me, I watch Louis Rossman's channel, The Right to Repair. Real estate prices were a lot different back in the 60s and 70s than they were today, right before inflation hit. We now went another 40 years and inflation hit yet again in terms of higher housing prices. Do not blame remote work. This is not remote work's fault. This is the market basically responding to the fact that everybody stayed home for a year and the government was generous with benefits.
Interesting take.
The government in this situation was really left with an interesting kind of situation where what they decided to do was noble and smart at the time. The long-term unfortunate aspects for state and local governments as well as companies is unfortunately prices had to go up. So we're stuck in a situation where people like you and I can even barely rent right now. And here I am looking at how somebody just achieved their first house with their partner. I mean, really?
I wonder how much they paid for that house, because I'm telling you right now.
On LinkedIn, I would not ask that question. I'd probably go ask that question in an Instagram message, but because
no, I'm not
state
talking
of New Jersey,
about personally. I'm just saying in general.
But like I said, it's not my business. My business, when I come on LinkedIn, I'm going to end on this note, and if you agree with me, that's cool, is as follows. When we do our posts on LinkedIn, inform the audience on the process that you took to purchase the specific thing. Walk us through the process on how your service, your boot camp, whatever it may be, is going to do for me. I don't care about what you bought in your personal life. In fact, honestly, at this point, while trying to find my way, it's a slap in the face.
Well, that's definitely fair. I feel that one for sure.
So with that said, once again, that ends cringe for this week. I hope you guys learned something. We'll see you very soon.
Bye.
Bye. Justin, who I'm going to introduce, had a few more things he wanted to say. So take it from here.
So, audience, so with this whole education and work, the thing that has changed and the assumptions that have changed are this. One, when it comes to work, no job is safe. Two, we don't get jobs anymore. Instead,
No, we really
simply,
do not.
but we don't get jobs anymore. Instead, we get job offers and we apply to jobs. Those are only two things we can do. And in terms of education, never stop learning, never stop credentializing. Always keep going because you never know. Because we have these kids out here that are 18 years old getting college degrees. So
and it's good.
crazy.
It's
and
good
it's
you brought that.
increase.
It's good you brought that up because I was just you were just showing me an article today about how these high school kids are now getting degrees much earlier. And I got to say something to the Gen Z kids who are just turning 18. You guys are definitely impressive because when I was your age, you didn't hear about this stuff as much. Where somebody was.
No.
You may have had a show like Doogie Howser, MD, which kind of made it look like it was completely possible, but that was in rare circumstances.
Oh, that's
I give
rare circumstances.
I give credit to you as a geriatric or older millennial, you guys that will have longevity in the workplace. But with that said, Gen Z, I'm going to give you guys some little advice on my own. Don't always look at what millennials Y2 tells you as good advice. Question the advice.
Absolutely.
Because millennials Y1 like myself and Justin will sit here and tell you just because they posted up their house doesn't mean you should share everything in your personal life, especially with how predatory people are with data nowadays. I had a conversation with my mom about this, and my mom, who's a baby boomer, said that this is not something that people should be doing, especially on social media platforms where your data is at risk.
Absolutely. Don't do it, Gen Z.
All right, guys.
But with that, just remember the economy goes up, economy goes down.
Just like sideways. A roller coaster.
Yes, it's like the boom and the bust, as far as I'm concerned.
All right, guys.
Please, one last thing, everyone. Learn economics beyond the principles level. It will save you a lot of time. It will allow you to make better decisions.
Stop listening to influencers. Influencers know nothing. They know nothing. They are trying to sell you overpriced products.
Stay thirsty, my friends.
Stay thirsty. All right.
Bye.
Bye.